Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
GSMC Football Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis. Obviously, we have a jam-packed football show for you today. I hope all y'all staying safe out there. I hope everybody's doing well. Obviously the news is here and there. Obviously, today's show, we're going to start with some draft news, and then we're going to go into the AFC, as now we're on the AFC side of things, where I give in-depth season and reviews to about 5 more teams today, and I discuss their seasons basically all the way up to this point, maybe any signings worth mentioning, anything like that. So, how we do on these shows, just to continue to give y'all stuff to hear, talk about. Obviously, the draft's coming up next Thursday, so obviously, that's going to be exciting. That probably would mean the day of when this podcast goes live. This might have. Yeah, well, I could sit here and say this is going to have some of the draft picks that are going to be announced in the next podcast. Well, the Thursday podcast, not the Monday podcast. I'm sure we do an NFL draft preview show on Monday, but yeah, we're going to do that, and I'm going to do that for the Thursday show next week. Talk about the NFL draft, obviously, since that's going to be the big news, trade rumors, all of those things. And I just want to give some early rumors now, just talk about it, give you some updates, because obviously that's going to be the big thing right now that's going to give us our news in today's world, and the thing we still are excited about, because the NFL draft is one of the most exciting things in sports right now. Obviously, as we know, the NFL and just in et cetera, not just the NFL, but the people involved in the NFL. Obviously, Roger Goodell is going to be doing draft picks from his basement, so obviously that's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see what else happens along the way. So I just think all of it all together will be a very interesting time and a very interesting process. But let's go ahead and get to the news now. I've done enough talking. Probably one of my longest intros I've done. So now we're going to get into some NFL draft news. Obviously, the biggest one is Tua. Tua Tagovailoa has been the biggest news since he's declared because of his injuries. You hear so many, and I mean so many different stories, so many different reports. Teams like him, teams don't like him, teams don't trust him, teams are unsure. Just so much. And, it really gives you a pause to think, so what is the truth on Tua? You have reports saying that his lower leg injuries and the hip is just too much to ignore. Teams just don't see themselves taking a top 10 draft pick on him because of those injuries. Some are like, a team might be okay with taking it. They just maybe nobody will trade up for him. It's a very controversial person. He's probably one of the most polarizing players that come out of college because of the injury. One team he's been tied to for the longest time has been the Miami Dolphins, and now there's reports they made their split. They don't know if they can take him at number 5 with those injuries. So maybe Justin Herbert could be at play there. But then you have San Diego. People think they're going to take Justin Herbert. Or they take Tua if they can't get Herbert. It's a very controversial topic with Tua because you just don't know. It's funny because I said, Tua has been doing all this, workout videos, pro days, rechecks, medical checks, trying to get teams to lower the doubt on him. But it feels like it's not working. It feels like they're still doubting it. It feels like they're still unsure. It feels like it may be even getting worse, and teams are just like, I can't do it. Because I just think teams don't want to select a guy, and then let's say he gets hurt or his shelf life isn't that long, And it's like we really wasted a top pick on him. And we're right back at the drawing board again when I could have maybe taken another quarterback who at least didn't have the durability issues. So we could now have more confidence that, hey, at least we know we're going to get a full chance and an opportunity of him playing to see him on the field and to see if he really could be our guy or not. So I think that's kind of where the Tua speculation and stuff comes from. I personally believe that Tua, to me, is the best pure talent at quarterback in this draft. So I think that's why he's so polarizing, because if he wasn't hurt, everybody would say he would be fighting for the top quarterback in this draft with Joe Burrow. But I think a lot of scouts would agree he is probably the most talented. It's just with that injury, it just makes you unsure. Do you think you're going to get that talented player and then not the injuries? And since that's the case, it creates a scenario where teams have to really think and calculate to themselves, do we want to make and take that chance on a guy who we may have to redshirt a year just so we can make sure he's healthy? I mean, with this pandemic and everything going on, it'll be interesting because with the pandemic and everything going on, I first think that's going to hinder rookie quarterbacks. That's why I've said multiple times, do not be surprised if Andy Dalton starts opening day, because let's say they can't get into training camp until July or until August or close to, let's say August. Let's say they can't even as a team first time work out all together till August. And the season still starts on time in September. Are you really going to put Joe Burrow out there after 4 weeks of practice with the team, knowing you can't do 2 a day, so you can't try to make up for it? Literally, it's still 1 a day practices. You get 1 practice a day, and you only get 4 weeks, and then you're playing regular season meaningful games. And I mean, they might do it, but it's just like, are you really going to be comfortable putting him out there in that situation? Because if he has a bad year, people could sit here and say, why did you play him? You knew he wasn't ready. You only had a month. And I think with Dalton on the team, it gives them that out where it's like, we start Dalton, he knows the team, he knows the offense. We don't have to scale back. We don't have to not do certain things. We could just go ahead and just go into it. And for me, it's just like, that's why I think any team that drafts a Tua, he's going to sit. Herbert, he's going to sit. I just think at least for a couple of games, they're going to sit. Burrow's going to start. The Bengals aren't going to be that good, so he's going to play. Chargers, we don't know. Tyrod, if let's say they drafted Tua or Justin Herbert. Miami, looks like they're going to try to win this year. Ryan Fitzpatrick has been a capable quarterback in the past. You just don't know what type of Ryan Fitzpatrick you're going to get. So I just think it's just going to be interesting to see what happens with the quarterback carousel with Tua. Just see, does he really drop in the draft like some people think, or does he remain a top 10 pick? Some people think yes, some people think no. Yeah, I guess we'll have to see how it plays out next Thursday. Other news, Detroit's looking to trade down from 3, looking for all buyers. Obviously, that was a pick that a lot of people felt like if you were going to go get one of those quarterbacks, you would trade up to 3. They're looking to trade down, get more picks, and they think they could probably still get their guy, the corner from Ohio State. So that's a team that you might see be active on draft day. They have said that they don't maybe think teams are going to be as active because of the fact that, with everything going on, since they're doing this draft system differently, they may not allow, or teams may not make as many trades as they would on a normal draft day. So that's going to be probably a very interesting dilemma. To see how that works out and how many trades actually are made. Also, the Jets have reportedly at number 11 in the draft, they're targeting a wide receiver, Henry Ruggs Jr. Obviously, that would not be a shock. They needed a guy to replace Robbie Anderson. Henry Ruggs Jr. is considered one of the best deep threats in this draft. And so they would just be placing someone who they think maybe has the talent to maybe even be a better receiver. But on top of that, also, it can replace the deep threat that they just lost for Sam Darnold. Obviously, getting weapons for Sam Darnold is a very big, deal, making sure that you give your franchise quarterback the weapons he needs to be successful and to be put his best foot forward for them to have a successful season this coming year. And just stuff like that. Obviously, we'll have to see. Patriots, they're said to be in the quarterback mix, so we'll have to see if they make any moves. People think that might be a connection they make, try to get Tua if he drops. We'll just have to find out and see what happens on draft day next Thursday, and it'll be very exciting to see how it all plays out and while we're watching it unfold on live television. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars and their season in review right here on the podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, I discussed NFL draft news. Obviously, like I said, big topic coming from draft. Really, probably leading up to that point will be Tua, as people are wondering where he will end up, who wants him, who's willing to take the chance on him, all of that. So that's going to be big news. We talked about, could he drop? Who might take him still in the top? Obviously, like I've said, Miami's been the team they've connected him to the most. But now they're saying that they even are not sure. They might just go take a Justin Herbert, because obviously this will affect Justin Herbert where he goes. Then this also could be a big factor with Jordan Love, where Jordan Love could go. Because, the only thing we know at the quarterback position that's very, confirmed without being confirmed is the best quarterback in this draft on a lot of people's boards, Joe Burrow, is going to Cincinnati. So, that. Obviously, we talked about the Jets going after Henry Ruggs Jr. That's their target. That's the guy they want to replace Rodney Anderson and potentially be maybe one of the best, if not best, receivers. Maybe looking for like a Tyreek Hill type player. Also, we talked about Patriots might want to get themselves in the QB mix, so that's something you also got to look out for. The Patriots potentially getting themselves into the mix to compete and play for a quarterback. And, just also the Giants trading down, because they're looking to potentially move off the third overall pick, get some more picks, but still feel like they can get the guy they want in the process. So obviously that's all a part of it, and so, I think that's going to be the biggest thing, I think. But, all right, so the team we're going to start with today, Jacksonville Jaguars. A couple years ago, we had Saxtonville. One of the best defenses in the league, manned by Blake Bortles at quarterback, and 3 minutes away from a Super Bowl berth. Now, last 2 seasons, disappointing losing seasons. Doug Marrone just completely, struggling to get control of this team. Feels like the team quit on him. Quarterback rotation door. Feels like people are just not reaching their potential. Defense wasn't as good as it's been. And basically just it's been a disappointing season for Jacksonville. Now, some people are wondering with Jacksonville's season and how it went. And the fact they didn't let go of Doug Marrone was shocked a lot of people, because a lot of people thought he was gone, and they kept him for another year. What is Jacksonville's plan for this next year? They traded Nick Foles, so there looks like, as far as we know, they're giving the reins to Gardner Minshew, who played well when he played. He wasn't a barn burner, but he played well. He showed he could play. Obviously, I think with a full season as a starter, you'll get to see truly if he's a guy that you want to invest your future in, or do you go ahead and draft next year. But some people think Jacksonville won't be that good of a team next year. So that's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, listen, they play the AFC South, which is a division that, there are good teams, but there's no team that's just great year after year. Closest thing right now we think is Tennessee, because obviously Houston losing DeAndre Hopkins, even getting Brandon Cooks, because we just don't know about Bill O'Brien. Tennessee seems like the best team overall, but some people just don't know about Ryan Tannehill. He's the quarterback. How far can they really go? So Jacksonville, if they can get something put together, I mean, if that's their goal, to compete, they can compete, especially in this division, and especially with an extra playoff spot. Because I've told you, teams like Jacksonville, like, okay, well, let's say we only need to be 8-8 to get in. Do we think with the roster we're going to assemble, this could be an 8-8 roster? So basically, we don't even have to be great. We just got to be mediocre, and we can get in. That could change teams' plans trying to, decide if whether they're going to have a tanking year or they're going to try to make the playoffs because of that extra seed that they have now. And Jacksonville may be one of those teams. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Gardner Minshew. I mean, obviously he has a lot of stories. He got the mustache, Minshew mania. A lot of things to like about him. 6th round pick, so obviously he was a guy. Usually when you're drafted low, it's like you're either a very, very true developmental, but developing into your peak of a backup guy. Usually we think a 6th round pick at best is like, okay, he could be a backup player. He has some things that you like, but he'll never be like a true NFL starter for a team. Obviously, this is giving Gardner Minshew the platform to show that he can be an NFL starter. And even if Gardner Minshew isn't going to be a superstar guy, just the ability to show teams, I can be a top backup in this league and win you games if you need me to. If you put me around a good team, I'm not going to be a liability. You don't want your backup coming in there with the talent you have and then the offense can't move the ball. You want to know that your backup can still make plays. Clearly, we know he can't do it maybe to the same efficiency as your starter can, but can he do it to at least 75, 60%? And so this gives him the opportunity. Obviously, they have Leonard Fournette, workhorse running back for him. I mean, he's been the main guy since he was drafted. He was brought in to be a workhorse, and he's done it. And, obviously, last year he had a good start to the season, kind of fell off, but the entire Jacksonville team kind of fell off at the end of the year. Everybody kind of started out playing as well. But we know what Leonard Fournette can do. He's a beast in the backfield. They have young receivers that a lot of people don't talk about. Chris Conley, Darius, DJ Shark. He's an underrated receiver. Nobody talks about him. He broke out last year. They have a lot of guys that D.D. Westbrook too. They have a lot of guys that they like and that can make plays for them. So they have some receivers. Obviously, had to make some improvements on the line. Defensively, they've been let down. Because remember, when they made Jacksonville, they put a lot of money into that defense. And their defense has started to let them down. They've let some guys go, obviously, because of that. Because obviously the defense got older and it wasn't producing. So, you need to free up some money. Jacksonville does have some dead cap because of that. But, it's what they had to do. Obviously, they've traded guys like A.J. Boye. That was a big trade they made. He was first they traded Jalen Ramsey, that didn't work. Then they traded him, so obviously that was big, getting rid of him. They got rid of their Pro Bowl defensive lineman Calais Campbell. Obviously they got a pick for him, and as you know, they traded Nick Foles. And then even their star defensive end, Nukwe, he doesn't even want to play. He doesn't even want to be there. He doesn't want to stay. He has no interest in staying. So they're looking for a trade partner for him. So they're losing 2 of their top defensive linemen and top 2 corners within the last half in the offseason of the NFL. So they're obviously restarting on defense, losing a lot of talent. Now they have made some deals. They signed Joe Sherbert from Cleveland, starting linebacker for Cleveland for the last few years, very well deserving of the deal. They signed Darquez Denard from the Bengals, a guy who's a solid guy, not a star, but a solid guy, just someone get in there in the secondary. Rodney Gunther, another guy that had some depth. They re-signed Lorente McCray, brought him back. That's my cousin, by the way. Al Woods and Cassius March. So they signed some defensive line depth mainly. Got a corner and a linebacker. I mean, they look like a team that just you don't expect to be great this year. But we'll have to see. And, I think that's going to be the interesting thing to see what the season actually turns into. because Jacksonville has always been a franchise, obviously since they were created in the 90s, don't have the storied history, as you say, as other teams. And so obviously, and so they don't have a winning tradition, as you say, but they've had some good seasons. It's really just a matter of, them getting the job done, doing what they have to do to be successful, and getting the right pieces in place. It feels like they could be taking this year, which would then probably mean the last year of Doug Marrone for sure. They just didn't want to go into this season starting over, knowing they were going to go into a losing situation with a new guy, I guess. So they were like, okay, we're going to let you do your last year. If somehow Jacksonville exceeded expectations, he'll keep his job, clearly. But if not, it's what a lot of people, I think, expect. And then they'll just be like, okay, now we know, okay, time to move on, time to move off, time to make the change, and bring this organization in a different direction, and hopefully in a direction that will help us and keep us winning and being successful going into the future as we try to figure out this team and the makeup of what we want to be as a Jacksonville Jaguar. But that was your Jacksonville Jaguars season in review. Up next, we're going to talk about the upstart Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. All of that right here and more.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about them Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, the sunny city of Jacksonville going through some very dark and rainy times the last 2 years, ever since Saxonville got them within 3 minutes of the Super Bowl. And I just think that, we discussed, basically the season was a disappointment. They have made some changes this offseason to kind of show what's going on. They've let go of a lot of elite defensive talent. And it's interesting to see what they're trying to do now, because we don't know, okay, well, it looks like on paper they're not going to be a good team, but they may think we're just getting younger and cheaper and we can still make it work with our coaching. Because, sometimes that happens where you just make it work with what you have and you end up being successful. And that could be what Jacksonville is doing here. They could be taking that route. So we really don't know what their plan necessarily is. So I don't think you could just sit here and put a label or anything on it. But now we're going to get into the Buffalo Bills, the upstarts of the AFC East and of the AFC after having a great year making it to the playoffs but losing in the divisional round to Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. The Buffalo Bills have a very, very bright future led by Sean McDermott. So, clearly, this is big for Buffalo. Because Buffalo has a very cherished history. Buffalo is not a team. You never think about Buffalo with a cherished history because we know about their history not being technically the best. They're, I think, the first team to go to 3-4 straight Super Bowls and lose them all. And, they've had a lot of losing things happen, but they've always been a competitive team throughout their franchise history. Buffalo, through mainly the 2000s, obviously ever since New England's been at the top, they have never won a division since the Brady era, but they've always been a team that was kind of mediocre. They always would hang around mediocrity. They had one season where they're good, but obviously New England still would be better, so at least they would be competing or close to getting a potential playoff spot. They kind of, been trying to figure it out. But they hired Sean McDermott, and then they drafted Josh Allen a year ago. Obviously, you could tell a year ago, before this past season, Josh Allen was learning. He was learning a lot. Made some mistakes, but he was learning. This year, he made some improvements. He was very careful with the ball this year. Didn't throw a lot of interceptions. Still needs to work on his passing game, work on fundamentals. But also, Buffalo, for the longest time, you can maybe even say since Lee Evans, has never had a true top-line wide receiver. They've had a lot of decent wide receivers or good wide receivers, but they've never had like a dangerous passing game. Buffalo has always been known for their running game and their defense. Buffalo has always been a good defensive team. They've always been a running football team. And even now to this day, they still are. They depend on the running game. But I think now with the quarterback of the future that they finally have found, and with the future and with the team on the uprising, you need that passing game to get you over the top with that defense and running game. And that's why one of the biggest moves they made this offseason was picking up Stephon Diggs. That alone, you could say, was one of the biggest moves Buffalo could have made all year long. Because they finally, for the first time in a long time, have found them a true number one wide receiver. It has given Josh Allen a target that he can go to, that you can really sit here and just like, okay, they've really added a lot to what they're trying to do. And so with that being known, that has created excitement. It has created excitement. It has created a hype. I would say there is a hype that has been created. And like I said, they've added some guys that they were looking at and that they needed. And to really, fill this team out. Obviously they added guys like E.J. Gaines. Adds depth. Obviously Tre'Davious White. They also added Josh Norman. Levi Wallace. This is probably one of the better secondaries in the league. Vernon Butler. Adds a pass rush next to Ed Oliver. That adds the defensive line. Improving from the front seven to the back end. Mario Addison coming in after they lost Shaq Lawson to Miami. Keeping that good. AJ Klein, he's a good smart linebacker. You know what I'm saying? They added some guards, a tight end. I mean, they added depth, they added team, because Buffalo's a team that they know what their biggest issues are. And I think with that being known, it's very evident that with New England taking a step back, that opens up the door for them to be the team to be in the AFC East. Because they have put themselves in position to be that team, to take over, to be the ones. They have done it and put themselves in position to do it. And so that's why with the talent, with Devin Singletary, another guy last year team, played well. it just seems like they're moving forward as a team where you expect them to be there. Now, how far? It only will determine on what Josh Allen can do. Josh Allen will determine how far Buffalo can go as a team. But from a roster and a constructive and a coaching standpoint, they're one of the best adjustment teams in the league because they made a lot of adjustments in second halves, which kept them in a lot of games and helped them win a lot of games. You know, they have all the potential in the world. If they get their offense, I feel like their offense could be so much more explosive this year. John Brown was a very reliable receiver, but he's better in the number 2 role. Now you have him with Stephon Diggs. They have guys they can go to deep underneath. Cole Beasley, a great slot. Tight ends. The running game with Devin Singletary. They're probably going to add a running back in the draft. I just look at this team and think Buffalo is a team that you have to watch out for. And when you see how this team is constructed after the draft, I think everybody's going to see. I mean, it's hard not to say they're going to be the top team coming out of the AFC East. If Miami, doesn't, you would think them. I mean, the AFC East is really up for grabs, but based off last year, Buffalo 10-6 making the playoffs, it seems like they could only get better. It just feels like, why not? Why wouldn't they? That's kind of, I think, the big thing. Why wouldn't they get better? Why wouldn't they get to that point? Why wouldn't they make that next step? And if Buffalo truly wants to get out of the way and become the team that people think they can be, next year is going to be crucial for them. Remember, again, extra playoff spot. So even if they don't have the same record, even if they finish 9-7, getting into the playoffs is still another success. Now, after a while, if they lose again the wild card or something, they're going to have to start winning to now make the next step. But just, showing a consistency to win, showing a consistency to make the playoffs, that's very important in this league because not everybody can have that type of longevity and type of consistency year to year with their teams. So Buffalo is definitely a team that you have to watch out for and just don't sleep on as you shouldn't because this team is coming and they're hungry. And that was your Buffalo Bills season in review. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the LA Chargers, what they've done this offseason, what they look like going into next season, big plans ahead in the draft.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the up-and-coming Buffalo Bills. We talked about how, they have really risen up the ranks and became more of a complete team. They became a team that you definitely have to worry about. A team that has all the potential to be one of the best teams in the NFL. Obviously, adding Stephon Diggs was a big year. The growth of Josh Allen will be a big deal. Sean McDermott has put together one of the best coaching staffs in the NFL, and all of that has contributed to the success that they have had, and they hopefully will continue to have moving forward. So hopefully, we'll see if the Bills can really actually take advantage of doing New England losing Tom Brady and win the AFC East. Because that's going to really show a lot to me if that happens. But now we're going to get into our next team, the LA Chargers. Usually in this podcast I say San Diego. This time I got it correct and called them the LA Chargers. The LA Chargers. Last season was a train wreck. The Chargers had this history the last couple of years of losing in a lot of close games. Like it's like they're good enough to always be in close games, but they always lose them in just the weirdest way possible, in every way possible. And it has contributed to why they can be considered one of the most inconsistent teams in terms of the talent they have on their roster in the NFL. Obviously, the first year of Anthony Lynn, that's what got them nit them in the bud. Then the second year, they seemed like they put it together. Obviously, again, they had one of the best rosters in the NFL, went 13-3. Then, this past year, it just really fell apart again. Obviously, they had injuries at wide receiver. Mike Williams was out to start the year. Keenan Allen was in and out. And then also just the Melvin Gordon situation, him not playing the first couple of games, sitting out, and then him coming back not being the same player. Also, just Phillip Rivers really turning the ball over. And there's one thing that you can't be in this league that Phillip Rivers is now is he's an older quarterback. He throws a lot of interceptions. It seems like Phillip Rivers, when you watch him play, just sometimes makes throws that you're just confused by. Like, wait, why? You're like, how many years in the league now? And you're making what kind of throws? And then on top of that, you have just him being immobile. Because the thing about the generation of quarterbacks like Eli and Big Ben, even though Big Ben is a mobile guy, and Phillip and all of them, they were really never guys who got out of the pocket. They were always, it was the traditional, you get them a good offensive line, they sit back there and they pick you apart. And now, with Phillip being immobile and now the game needing quarterbacks to be mobile, and I guess pass rushers getting better, Rivers is kind of a liability in that department. So obviously, Phillip Rivers moves on to the Indianapolis Colts. So now the question is, what do the Chargers do? They re-sign Austin Eckler to a new deal. So it looks like he'll be the main back going into the year. I do suspect that the Chargers will look at a running back in this year's draft to try to replace Melvin Gordon, because I'm sure you don't want Austin Eckler carrying the whole load. Obviously, you still have a lot of talent on this team. You still have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, one of the best duos in the league. You have Hunter Henry, one of the best tight ends in the league. The Chargers still have defensive talent. They had some injuries with Derwin James and everybody. So there's a lot here that you can still like. There's a lot here that you can still work with and really get behind with them. It's just a matter of them putting themselves in position to be healthy first and to be successful. Because that's going to be the key to this situation with them. They're trying to sit here and they're trying to compete, play at a high level, do what they got to do, and really be consistent for the first time they've been in a while. But obviously with this, there's a new start that has to be made. Obviously, the quarterback position right now for San Diego is their biggest question. Right now, they have Tyrod Taylor on the roster, who Anthony Lynn has came out multiple times and supported him, saying that there is a very strong possibility Tyrod Taylor will be our starting quarterback going through the season. And with, this pandemic happening and training camp being cut short, it sounds very, very likely that he will be the guy going into game one. And there's nothing wrong with that. Tyrod Taylor has won in this league. He has been a starter in this league. He may not be a top-end starter, but he's a guy who can start. He's a good bridge quarterback for any team, and I think that's going to be what the Chargers need. Now, obviously, their biggest question is kind of the same situation that Miami's in right now. Who do you take? Tua, if available, or Justin Herbert? It seems like from all the reports, if the draft went like some people thought it would go, and Miami takes Tua, they're going to go take Herbert, and they're comfortable with that decision. Obviously, there was questions, would San Diego Chargers maybe potentially trade up to get Tua from the Dolphins? Because obviously I've told you Detroit is open to trading back. So would that be a possibility? Right now, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I think San Diego's going to stay put, but they obviously need that situation solved. Let's just say they do draft Justin Herbert. You have your guy for the future. You have Tyrod who can start for you right away, so you don't have to thrust him out onto the field if he's not ready. And with the talent San Diego has, listen, there's one thing about Tyrod Taylor that's been consistent throughout his entire career. He's never been a guy who turns the ball over. He is probably one of the best guys at never turning the ball over in the NFL. So that is one thing I think that you can definitely look at and say, okay, I trust that he won't cost us a game. Because you got those quarterbacks who sometimes cost you a game. And so he's the guy who usually doesn't cost you a game, but some people like to say, well, he doesn't win it for you either. So it just depends. And with the San Diego talent, I'm sure the game plans that San Diego might have are going to be more projected on our talent, our defense, our running game, and then Tyrod just making the right throws. Because that's when we've seen him being at his best. Obviously, he took the Bills to the playoffs a few years ago. And so, like I said, he has the capabilities of being a starter and playing well in this game. It's just, like I said, if they draft Justin Herbert, he's a guy that I think would fit with the culture. Obviously, he's a West Coast guy because he played at Oregon. So it's not like he's moving that far. It's not like he's having to get used to a new time zone. He'll just move from Oregon to LA. And obviously, LA is a big brand, so he'll have to deal with the brand of the Los Angeles playing with that team. But at the same time, a guy who I think would fit what they do. They have talent around him. San Diego is probably one of the best situations for a rookie quarterback to go into if they had to play right away because of the talent surrounding them. There are some questions that is Anthony Lynn a good coach, but for the most part, San Diego's solid. Like I said, they made a couple additions to the team this year. They're a team that they could say injuries cost us last year and a couple of things, and we'll address those things. And then we're just going to go at it again next year. Hope for the best, and really just try to get back on track, because that's the biggest thing for them is they want to get back on track. They want to be able to be successful and win. That's kind of the biggest thing I think that they want. It's just to be able to do what they got to do to get back on track, win, be successful, and just, get this team and this organization in the right direction moving forward. Because obviously, with them being in LA, like I said, they're having to build a brand. And LA so far has not adapted to the teams very well, with the Rams and them. So if they want to start getting that support, they're going to have to start winning. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of teams rebranding, if the Chargers rebrand eventually. Try to rebrand their team, for the LA area, and just get this thing rolling, get this thing right, and get themselves in the right direction that they want to be in as a franchise. As the San Diego's had a very up and down history in their franchise, and obviously it's continued for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years with them. So, like I said, they're going in a new direction at quarterback. We'll have to see what this new regime, with whoever is the new quarterback, and just this team this year and how it looks. So it'll be very interesting to just see how it all plays out. But that was the San Diego not the San Diego. See, I did it again. I can't do it, guys. It's just gonna be impossible for me. But that was your LA Chargers season in review. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns and their season in review.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the LA Chargers, their season, how things have changed. Obviously, they're moving on at quarterback. We'll have to see who they draft in this year's draft, see who they're moving forward with. Phil Rivers' era is now gone and done with San Diego, LA. Obviously, they are still probably, I would say, one of the more talented rosters in the league. They have talent on both sides of the ball. There were some injuries last year that hurt them and could have contributed to the way they played last year. But obviously, like I said, LA has been a team that has struggled in the past to finish games, to win games in close situations. And so that is something that they definitely want to try to do better this year, so they don't have the same season that they had last year, or else Anthony Lynn could be on his way out from LA. Obviously, again, with them moving and everything, those types of things could influence ownership, maybe saying we might need to make a change, we might need to make a cut, it might be something we need to look into, so let's just see what we decide to do. But now we're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but Cleveland rebranded today. And they have new uniforms. And their uniforms look exactly the same, except they removed some of the extra stuff that some people actually didn't care to see. So their uniforms are more classic, it's basically what they have now, but without all the Cleveland and all that. It's more basic Cleveland colors. Like, I could see some of the old brown, now brown mixture. It's just a better design. Obviously, like I said, teams are going through a redesigning period for a lot of their jerseys and brands. And so I think that, obviously, that's changed some things. That has definitely changed some things. And, I think that it definitely helps. I think, obviously, you want to look good in what you play in, but that's not the only thing that's changed in Cleveland this offseason. They fired head coach Freddie Kitchens after a disappointing 6-10 year. Baker Mayfield regressing. Odell unhappy. Everybody unhappy, really. Just a lot of things went wrong for Cleveland. And so they hired Vikings offensive coordinator Kevin Stefanski to take over and to be the guy to lead them into this new era with Baker Mayfield as the quarterback. Now, obviously, you always hear these situations since this regime, even though basically Baker was drafted by Hugh Jackson, but at the same time was coached by Freddie Kitchens, so you can say that regime was Baker's regime. This is a new regime. Obviously, Baker having that down year, he needs to come back this year and have a better year to keep his job as the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. Because Cleveland is one of the most, again, talented rosters in all of the NFL. You have 2 top running backs. You have 2 top receivers. You have a very good tight end group. Obviously, Cleveland's weakness on the offense is their offensive line, which they're trying to fix. They've signed some guys. They'll probably draft another guy. So clearly they're going to try to get that fixed, get the offensive line right. Defensively, they have one of the most talented front sevens in all of football, especially in the defensive line. That's their strength. So constructively with this team, they have a lot of talent to be a top team in the NFL. It's just putting it all together, handling all of those personalities, and making it work. That's kind of the biggest thing that is missing from this team, is that they're having a hard time meshing personalities, everybody getting along, and playing consistently. And so I think, it's just one of those things where they gotta get it together. And that's what Kevin Stefanski is here for. And also, bringing in a new GM, they really kind of reshaped the front office again. Obviously, Cleveland's reshaped it multiple times, but just getting a new GM, a new direction, and a new coach, I think, with this talent. Because in previous past, the difference between Cleveland rebuilds now and Cleveland rebuilds before is usually Cleveland's were usually the worst rosters in the league, and so the issue was just getting talent on Cleveland, and coach after coach failed to, because they could never find the quarterback, and they were just bad at other things. Even though they had a player here or there that was decent or good, it was hard to get it all together. Now you're in a situation where Cleveland has the talent to be good this year, but the coaching has to put it all together. Cleveland just never had the luxury of having both things work out and do well for them. They haven't had that luxury. They've always had something let them down. So, obviously, like I said, this is a big year for Baker. He has to show he is a franchise quarterback. They drafted him number 1 overall. The pressure is on him. A lot of critics are on him. They've talked about his maturity. And, me, I think Baker has the potential to be a very good starting quarterback in this league. I really do. I just think Baker's a guy who needs a particular team around him and a particular system that works. And there's nothing wrong with that. He is not a guy with his talents and his physical limitations that you could say, okay, it's going to be dysfunctional, but lead us to victory. He is not a Carson Wentz. But if you give him weapons and you give him offensive line, running game, defense, Baker is plenty good enough and talented enough to get the job done, in my opinion. That's why he placed away his rookie year. Because remember, Cleveland, when he played his rookie year, actually had one of the better offensive lines. It was that offseason they kind of tore the offensive line down to get other pieces, and that's why the offensive line was the biggest issue. So I think Baker has all the potential in the world to be a guy who, long term, could be one of the best in the league. Really, could be one of the best. They have all the potential in the world. They have all the potential to do it. I think, there may be some pressure, but I know Cleveland is definitely going to do what they got to do to make sure that they put themselves in the best position possible to be successful. Obviously, again, they have to make sure they can get Odell and Jarvis Landry, on the same page. Obviously, you've been hearing it a lot that some people think that they're not happy with Odell. They don't want to deal with Odell, so they're maybe considering trading him. We don't know if anything will happen. Usually, trades won't happen after the draft too much because, obviously, you still have the picks for next year, but you don't know how good the team is going to be. You don't know what the value of the pick's going to be. I mean, if it's a first, you may feel like, it's a first, so we're going to take it. But it just depends. I don't know. His value might go down after that. Plus, like I said, with this season the way it is and what it could shape up to be, I mean, you really don't know if you would want to make a trade for Odell because you have to get him acclimated. And basically, there's no offseason program or a very, very short offseason program. So is it really going to help to bring in someone new like him to your system? But if they keep him, like I said, they have one of the best receiving corps in the league. They have all the potential in the world to be very, very successful and to be one of the best teams in the NFL and in the AFC. I mean, they're in a very tough division with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. So Cleveland's going to have to fight and claw to be at the top. It's not going to be easy. And I think that's the big thing. But, it really just depends, like I said, on how you feel about it, what your feelings on it are. Cleveland's definitely a very polarizing team, a very interesting team, and a team that people will definitely pay attention to see if Baker gets it together, if this team comes together, because if they do, Cleveland could be a very surprise team in terms of making runs to the playoffs. Again, that 7th playoff spot could also help them long-term to get into the playoffs. So, with a very talented AFC, we'll have to see how it all works out for the Cleveland Browns. But that was your Cleveland Browns season in review. Next and lastly, we're going to talk about the Houston Texans and this offseason with Bill O'Brien and everything right here on the podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Last segment, we talked about those good old Cleveland Browns, baby. Obviously rebranding, changing up the image, changing up the look, doing little things a little different, you know what I'm saying? Obviously, we talked about it's a big year for Baker Mayfield, obviously, to prove that he's the franchise quarterback of this team. Number one over our draft pick, expectations are huge with this talent. If they don't get it done, he'll be replaced. Or there'll definitely be conversations about replacing him. Because remember, the regime that he was brought in with is not there anymore. This is a new regime. So that's not the guy that they drafted. So he has to prove himself, or else they will not hesitate to look in a different direction. Also, also getting Cleveland out of their forever trench of mediocrity is also the highest thing also they're trying to do, is trying to get themselves out of that situation of Cleveland always never being able to reach expectations, even though they barely have expectations. And then if they never have expectations and you put a team in position to have expectations, they don't reach expectations. So, but now we're going to get into the last team of this episode that we're going to review is the Houston Texans. Obviously, Houston has had a very interesting offseason. They made Bill O'Brien the full GM, which obviously we can discuss, which we will discuss, and very, very negative reviews for him so far. Honestly, Houston has always been a team that has talent, that has the ability to be one of the best teams in the AFC. It feels like they have the franchise quarterback, they have the receiving weapons, they have the offense. Defensively, there's always been an issue, but they have a pass rush. They've always been a team that if they could just get a couple of things right, they could then go forward. And I think that's kind of the big thing, I want to say. That's kind of the big thing here that I think you have to look at. With Houston, it's just, that's why I think Bill O'Brien's being so criticized. Like, when they traded DeAndre Hopkins, it was just like, he was one of the reasons why you were able to win. He was the big to play target for Deshaun Watson, and now you're taking that away. Brandon Cooks they traded for. He's a good receiver, but he's not DeAndre Hopkins. And it just feels like, I don't get why you don't want to pay your top receiver money. Like, he's a top receiver. Like DeAndre Hopkins is one of those receivers where he should get his money. I understand he has 3 years left on his deal, but you could add money to his years. You could maybe add bonuses. You could restructure. Like, you could front load. Like, there are ways you can negotiate it, and for some reason it's like you tell them I want more money, and now it's okay, you can leave. And that just was confusing, because it's just like, well, why would it be just so easy just for to drop off your best wide receiver? It just feels like Houston will always be in this cycle of mediocrity, because they don't really have a future. They don't really have much of anything. Houston, like I said, is also one of the new franchises that have been around. I believe 2000 was the first year maybe they were a franchise. So they haven't been along that long. I mean, and they have had, obviously, at the start, a very losing culture. And it wasn't until I think they had their first great good season when Matt Schaub got there and had that Pro Bowl year with Andre Johnson and all them. And then ever since Deshaun Watson, they've been kind of here and there with talent, where they have talent, but they're never like a top team, but they're like a good team, and that's where they are now with Bill Bryan. You know, it just feels like there's so many things that have gone wrong for them. And you just think, okay, well, they have talent. If they just switch this, if they add that, if they change that, if they do that, you would think, okay, well, if this happens, if that happens, you know, then they can become good. And then you get to it, and you're just kind of like, well, we thought something was going to change, but it seems like we're still doing the same thing. And I just think that it's just something that it will continue to affect the Houston Texans until they get it figured out. Bill O'Brien so far has been a horrible trade. If David Johnson does not return to Pro Bowl David Johnson, this trade was absolutely terrible, and there's no way he can defend it. I've said to people, if it doesn't get better, he's out of there. He's out of there. There ain't no way the owner's gonna keep him. There's just no way. Because you can logically sit here and say, okay, well, he didn't put this team in position to be successful. He put this team in position to struggle. He put this team in position to fail. And as obviously, you never want to feel like that you're not putting the best possible product out on the field. And I think that's the biggest thing. So, I just think there's a lot of things that have to change. There's a lot of things that have to go different. If things will change, we don't know. It might never ever change. But things have to, if they're going to get stuff right. And, you know, like I said, Houston coming into this draft, obviously might need to find you a running back, might need to find you a receiver. Still got to get the offensive line improved. That's always been an issue under Bill O'Brien. Got to get you some secondary help. So clearly there are issues that are there that still need to be resolved. And just continuously, you know, happen. So there's things that have to change here if they're going to be successful. I think they know it. And moving forward. So I think that's just the biggest thing that, to me, that Bill O'Brien has got himself into a situation where if they don't win this year. Now, the only thing that could save him is if this lockout stuff, not lockout, but Corona stuff, really messes up the season. You could maybe say that could be why. But still, it's just like, it didn't have to be this way. Houston fans are ready to get the man out of there. Some people are even concerned. Could this maybe cause a guy like Deshaun Watson to say, you know what? I don't think they're going to put me in the best position to win here. So when my contract comes up, I might not resign. And if they try to franchise me, I want a trade. Or he might ask for a trade after this season. See, the thing is, Deshaun Watson knows he might get a lot of money, so he might be like, you know what, I'm going to get paid by them. They're going to pay me, right? Like, you would think so. Because the last thing you want to do with your Bill O'Brien is make your franchise quarterback not happy. But we'll have to see what happens with Houston this year. They're a team that, with Deshaun Watson, always has a chance. But maybe Bill O'Brien will just be too much in his way for them to maintain success. And that was the GMC Football Podcast for you today, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in for another day. Obviously, you already know what we're doing. Monday, me and Ethan coming back at you next Thursday. More of a pre-draft show, like a draft show. I might do some season reviews in there. We'll have to see. But appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure y'all stay healthy out there. Stay safe. Have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.